Welcome to another episode of The Financially Free Investor, where you will learn information and strategies on how to become financially independent by investing in real estate, something that is not taught openly in our society today. Financial freedom matters so you can live a bigger life, retire early, and do what matters most to you. Get ready to hear tried and true methods to becoming financially free with your host, Jordy Clark.
All right, everyone, welcome into another episode of The Financially Free Investor. I'm super pumped for this episode. I actually have been wanting to get this guest on for a little while. He kept kind of popping into my head, and I just got busy doing everything, so I never called him and invited him on. But here we are. We finally connected. Joey Webb is our guest today. Joey owns an insurance agent. He's a flipper. He does a ton of stuff. So welcome in, Joey.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm glad we got to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, dude, maybe give the folks listening 1 to 2 minute version of who is Joey Webb.
Yeah, great. So my intro is basically born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada until I was 24 years old. Then I got married to my wife, who is from Utah. And so we got married and moved up here to Utah. So that was about 10 years ago. But born and raised in Vegas, grew up doing high adventure stuff, racing motocross, wakeboarding, surfing, I'm an adrenaline junkie. And then lately, the past 10 years since I've been in Utah, I've transitioned to more endurance sports. So Ironman events, distance cycling events, 200 plus mile biking events, stuff like that. So just enjoy getting outdoors. And that's why I love being here in Utah now, enjoying the great outdoors. So we've got 4 kids now. So we've been married for just over 10 years. And I own the insurance agency. So I do that day to day, and started investing about 6 years ago.
Awesome. Well, real quick, how old are your kids?
So we've got 7, 5, 3, and 1.
Okay. So if you are listening and you have kids, do not use that as an excuse to not invest, because I've got young kids. Joey has young kids. You can do it, right? Yeah. So maybe let's jump in. How'd you get started on your journey to financial freedom?
Yeah, well, speaking of kids, that's a great segue. So basically what had happened is 2016, someone that I knew I was out at lunch with just mentioned Bigger Pockets. And I don't know exactly what year they got started, but it was new to me in 2015, 2016. Started listening to that and learned about house hacking. And me and my wife, we owned our own home and we were doing just fine, no kids, just living our daily lives. And then I got turned on to Bigger Pockets and heard about house hacking. I was like, wow, this is powerful stuff. So 3 months later, we put that single family house that we lived in on the market. We found a duplex on the market. So we moved into that duplex, house hacked it, and we had our first kid right when we were living in that duplex. And then for the next 6 years, we moved 5 times in the next 6 years. So we moved almost every single year, having 4 kids along the way. So we were adding kids and adding houses at the same time, and living in duplexes with, young children and babies. And some of them weren't in the most desirable locations, but we made it work. And it really gave us a great segue into becoming a landlord and learning investing with a pretty low risk approach, moving into it and having the tenants next door. And so we did that for several years and picked up about 5 properties in 6 years.
Wow. Okay. That's great. 5 properties in 6 years and 4 kids in 6 years, right?
Yep.
All right. It's a lot.
It was a busy time. And so 2019, just to jump ahead a little bit, 2019, we found our dream house in Mill Creek. My wife said, hey, I'm not moving anymore. I said, it's totally fine. I get it. I appreciate the patience over the last 5 years, but we were both on the same page. And I would just mention that that's probably one of the biggest key pieces too, is making sure, your spouse, whether it's husband or wife or whatever, is on board. And I would say it wasn't instantaneous or immediate, because people have different backgrounds and different understandings of financial freedom and how to get there. But just bringing your spouse along the journey versus dragging somebody along makes it a lot easier. So I'm grateful for my wife that she caught the vision and she was able to put her head down and move while we were having kids.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how did you sell that vision? Because A, it's just hard enough to move once a year for 6 years. But then B, you layer in kids on that and duplexes and tenants. And, that's always something I wanted to do, but life took me a different path, which is fine. So I'm curious, how did that conversation go with your wife?
Yeah, I would say two things on that. Number one is, I tried to, have her listen to Bigger Pockets or read books, and share as much info. I mean, it wasn't her natural forte. She's a nurse and works in the nursing field, so she enjoys that. And so she's not as data driven as I am, but I would just say after a little bit, of listening to the same stuff and trying to get on the same page, it really made sense. And you really just have to have a long-term vision, because like you said, the short-term sacrifice of moving and kids, you have to understand that this is going to pay off in 5, 10, 15 years, and it's going to allow you to do so much more in the future. And just like your podcast talks about, the financial freedom, like you just have to be able to understand that the long-term gain is worth the short-term sacrifice. And then just real quick on the house hacking, I mean, I just want to be straight up with everybody. I had no idea what real estate investing was, or tenants, or being a landlord was. And our very first duplex that we closed on, that we moved into, the tenant on the other side that was staying, she had been there like 10 years. And I was like, great, we'll move in. The tenant's already set in place, like no big deal. And like right after we closed, the tenant gave us notice and said, hey, I'm moving out. And I was crapping my pants. I was terrified. What do I do? How do I get a lease? How do I find somebody? And it's just the learning process that you go to. And, we've had multiple rentals since then. And I mean, finding a tenant, screening them, once you've done it a few times, just like riding a bike, now it doesn't bother me at all if somebody moves out. And so I would just say though that, I had those fears. I was up all night. What am I going to do? And so you just have to learn and grow and go through those growing pains and put yourself outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's so true, man. And even just, in any area of our life, whenever we need to grow, like you literally have to go through whatever is next. Right. And so props to you guys for figuring it out. I'm sure there was a ton more as you guys learned and grew and did everything. So, question is, maybe break down what you bought every year and what you looked for, and let's go from there, because I'm super interested to learn for myself personally.
Sure. Yeah. So the first one we bought was a duplex. And then at the end of that year, we moved into a single family house. And then after that, we moved into another duplex in South Salt Lake. And then after that, it was another single family home. And then the one after that was our final single family home that we're in currently. And so, yeah, we had 3 single family homes and 2 duplexes. And we've since sold off, 2 of the single family homes and 1 of the duplexes. So currently right now, I feel like I'm not a true landlord. I've only got 1 duplex technically in my portfolio, but the last 2.5 years, we've been heavy focused on flipping and wholesaling and other stuff. So I took my foot off the gas pedal on buying rentals, which is unfortunate because I would have loved to have bought more the last 2 years, but we learned a lot in flipping, and we've been, growing in different areas. So I still consider myself a beginner, and I'm figuring out what I want to do when I grow up being an investor.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone in that feeling. So, so what made you guys decide to sell some rentals? Because I think a lot of people, in their mind, they want passive income, they want to quit a job. So they buy rentals, and most of the time what I hear is, oh, I'm going to own this 30 years. Right. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think there are some assets that you can hold forever, but I think as you start going, you have to be very opportunistic at what comes your way and pick up what makes sense today, knowing that the first, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the first 10 properties that you buy are probably a stepping stone to you figuring out really what you want to do in investing in real estate. Because I love Bigger Pockets. I know a couple of the Bigger Pockets guys. And the problem is, there are so many ways to make $1 million in real estate. And you can be like, oh, I want to go do self-storage. Oh, I want to go flip houses. I want to go buy duplexes. I want to go buy apartment complexes. And you just get this shiny object syndrome. And so anyways, why did you guys, back to my question, why did you guys choose to sell some? Because I think a lot of people, once they own something, they have a hard time letting it go. So walk us through that.
Well, I'd say a couple reasons. One is because since we did house hack them, some of them we lived in longer, some shorter. And so some of them we were able to get away with the no capital gains tax. So that was really appealing. And I would 100% agree with you that the first few properties are just stepping stones, and they give you the leverage and the opportunity to either trade up in assets or shift into a different asset class or whatever. And I would say that there's two things to kind of what you're saying is, number one is, it's definitely, you got to be aware of the shiny object syndrome, because everyone gets tempted with new strategies and whatever. But you need time to figure out what you're good at and your skill sets are. So whether that ends up being flipping, whether that ends up being property management, and you just want to start purchasing larger assets and manage them for a fee, or if you want to wholesale because you're a good marketer or sales guy, whatever it is, that takes a while to figure out. And so you can use those first couple of properties either to inject capital to, start up a wholesaling business or flipping business or whatever it is. So it can definitely be leveraged. And then number two, obviously you have to shift with the market and whatever the market's doing. And so really that's kind of what we did is the last 2 years, 2.5 years, we focused on flipping just because my wife wasn't going to move anymore. So I said, all right, let's generate some cash through flipping. Plus, I've always wanted to try to do it and just see if it's my skill set. I would say I definitely tend to over improve like almost every time. And so it may not be my strongest skill set flipping houses, but obviously the market was great the last 2 years. So I learned a lot, and at least I now have that skill set. And if the opportunity comes up, I'm more than confident that I can, at least know my numbers enough to take the deal down or pass on it. So really everything in investing boils down to knowing your numbers, whether it's wholesaling, flipping, investing, BRRRR method. If you know your numbers, and that's really the biggest learning curve the first couple of years is investing, and same with me, is sticking to your numbers, knowing your numbers, and being able to project forward is a huge part of being successful.
Yeah, so good. So let's talk about flipping, because obviously you sold some rental properties because you wanted to go into flipping, or just try that out. And flipping is very capital intensive. Yeah. Because usually you're putting down 20% and then you have to fund the rehab. And, I've got one flip going on in your neck of the woods right now up in Canyon Rim. Mm-hmm. And I paid $620 for the house, and then I put my down payment down, and then my rehab is like $150. So like, it's a lot of capital, right? Which is why I'm assuming you guys sold a couple of rentals, because you want to try to grow that. And the nice thing about flipping is compared to buy and hold, and I'd love to get your take on this, is why you sold everything. I'm assuming it, but I just want to state my thesis, and then you can tell me. Your money with flipping comes back to you, right? So if I invest, we'll call it $200,000 in a flip, I'll get my $200,000 back plus a return of $20, $30, $40, $50,000, right? Whatever that may be.
Right.
But then I have that chunk of money that I can redeploy. And so if I want to grow my wealth exponentially and I want to do it faster than the next 40 years, the best way to do it is get that back and recycle it as quick as possible, right? Versus if I buy a fourplex for $800,000 and I have to put $200,000 down, that money's locked in there. And, I may get a few bucks every month of cash flow, but I can't touch it. I can't tap into the equity. So is that why you guys sold your properties, so that you can grow your wealth faster? I'm not going to say like get rich quick, but right. Flipping has its advantages, right? It's also riskier.
Right. Yeah. You're exactly right. So what you're talking about is basically the velocity of money. So there's two kind of principles. Number one is the velocity of money. It's like if I put 100 grand in and I can pull 30,000 out in 6 months, that's a very quick velocity of money. And you can do it twice a year if your flips take 6 months, right? So, you could get a $60,000 return on $100,000. That's 60% return. That's a huge return in 1 year annualized. So there's the velocity of money. And then there's also, the return on equity that you have to look at. So, we had huge appreciation in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And so, if we had 50% loan to value or 50% equity in some of our properties, and we have 300,000 of equity sitting there, if you look at the return on equity based off what rents you're getting and the cash flow you're getting versus how much capital is sitting there unused, then that can make you a little antsy to say that's just dead money sitting there. And so there's a fine balance, though, I would say. And every investor has to, again, figure out your skill set and what you think you're good at to make the most return. But there's a fine balance between leaving money in there and not looking at it, not touching it, and just building long-term wealth, which is what buying rentals is, and just not thinking about return on equity. And then there's also the other side of velocity of money. If I have a good skill set that I can get a better return elsewhere, I've got to plow capital into that to be able to get that return back. But then it's just, you always have to take that money from over here, like you said, from doing your flips and putting it back into the long-term wealth. And so that's kind of the transition we're in now. So like I said, the last 24 months was just crazy. The market was hot with selling flips. Everything would sell for 100 grand over. And so we were just going really hard on that. And so now we haven't bought a flip in the last 7 months just because we're finishing up a really big one, and we can talk about it if you want.
Yeah.
As soon as we sell the really big flip, then I'm going to be transitioning back into more buying rentals and looking for bird deals. And so I'm not saying that I'm done flipping, but I did it for 2 years and we figured out our strengths, our weaknesses with it. And like I said, I'm confident that I can do one if it ends up being a deal. And it's a tool in the tool belt to be able to do it, whether the market gets, better for flipping or whatever. But I think I'm going to transition back more into acquiring rentals.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm
real quick before we move on, I would just say another skill set that I learned from the flipping, like you said, to touch on the capital intensive between the 20% down and then the rehab money. We've been able to raise some private money from some partners and put together some partnerships. So that's been a really almost more valuable than the house flipping itself, just creating partnerships and being able to take somebody's money, do an investment deal, give them back their money plus the return. To do that psychologically was a big leap for me, because I think ultimately if I were to project forward probably 5 to 10 years, I'll probably be somewhere in the apartment, either syndicating and or apartment acquisition space. So that was almost more valuable to me than just learning the flips itself.
It's interesting you say that, because I think this is all and this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I think you embody well the progression of an investor, right? First, you just kind of start out doing stuff. You don't have any money, so you buy something with very little down, which is a great strategy for house hacking. But, at a certain point that has to end for everyone. All the way on the other end of the spectrum is a professional investor. And professional investors use other people's money, right? Like Ken McElroy is a professional investor.
Yeah.
My buddy Mike Ayala is a professional investor. Justin Donald is a professional investor, right? Like all of these big name, like Brandon Turner, they figure out how to do it. And then they go borrow or partner with people, use their money, and they go do really big deals, right? Like Grant Cardone. So I just think this is a awesome embodiment of your progression and journey into, and I'm super excited to see what the next decade brings you, just as a fly on the wall. The question I was going to ask you was, who are you surrounding yourself with as you're progressing as an investor?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm glad that we brought that up, because I was going to say that was the basis of all of it. So number one was the bigger pockets. I just started listening, reading the books, diving into it. But then at some point you have to take action. And the very first action I took wasn't making an offer on a house. It wasn't, finding a realtor or whatever it was. My very first action was I Googled my local real estate meetup and I showed up to the very first meeting. So that was at the Red Robin Sloria Luncheon back in, I think, 2016. I sat down, my very first meeting, I sat down next to Devin Hubbard, who's a great friend, close friend of mine, and just started building relationships from there. And so your network is your net worth. Everybody knows that. And so first is putting the information in your brain, understanding the concepts so you can talk the talk, then go to the local meetups, start shaking hands, taking people to lunch, and going down that road, because you're right. So the inflection point. So when my wife said, "Hey, I'm not moving anymore. I'm not, house hacking anymore," that was October of 2019 when we bought our, primary residence that we live in. That was the exact same month that I went to a Sloria meetup and met my current business partner, Jaden Olson. And so we've been the ones flipping houses together and doing deals together since then. And so that connection for me was very important because I needed that extra step of confidence, and I needed that knowledge that Jaden had to be able to take the next step into doing deals with hard money and private money and start flipping. And so without that knowledge piece and that partnership and relationship, it's been good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And one other quick thing I'd mentioned that I just shared at a local meetup that I spoke at recently, speaking of networking, is me and Jaden identified in beginning of 2020 what was going to exponentially grow our business, and it was relationships in our network. And so I'll give this tip out that we created 4 Bs that we want to take to lunch every single month. So once a week, we go to lunch with somebody. So the first one is a baller, what we call. So someone like yourself, Jordan, or Jordy, someone that's ahead of us in the game that we want to aspire and look up to. So we take a baller to lunch just to inspire us. Then we take a beginner to lunch. So we want to reach back and help other people that aren't as far along as us. And we want to recognize how far we've come, not in an arrogant way, but just to realize, hey, I'm, learning these things. I can share value and, help somebody else in the journey. And then brokers or agents is the third B. So you have to have brokers in your pocket, be able to talk to them, find the deals, find the off-market deals. And then the fourth one is bankers. You always need lending, you need funding, whether it's private money, hard money, local banks, national banks. And so we always try to network really hard with lenders. And so if you take that down, write that down, and take those 4 people out to lunch every single month, so 1 a week, that is the 4 areas that you need to find deals and to fund deals.
Man, that's so good. Everyone should go back and rewind for 30 seconds and re-listen to that, because really at the end of the day, like, it's not about the money. It's not about the deals. It's not about the houses or the cars or whatever. It's all about relationships. So I love that. Good for you guys. Well, I'm curious, what's one thing you would want to tell someone who's working towards financial freedom?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I would just say you have to start somewhere, and I would say there's different styles. There's so many different styles to financial freedom. And, step number 1 is defining that, so whether that's 5,000 a month, 10,000 a month, 20,000 a month, first of all, you have to know what you're shooting for. So try to define it for yourself. So whether that's quitting your job or keeping your job, everybody has their own style. And then number 2 is just to find the people that are doing what you want to do and just, get close to them, buy their course if they have a course, buy their mentorship if they have a mentorship program, whatever it is, to get close to them. Because some people love Grant Cardone and the 10X, and they go hard with him. I don't personally vibe with him. I think he's a fantastic guy. He's very smart, but I just don't enjoy his stuff as much as I do other people's. And so whether that's Pace Morby or Brandon Turner or whatever these names are that are out there, just, because there's the, what's it called? The financial minimalist, the Mr. Money Mustache, right? And so some people think financial freedom is just lowering your expenses as much as possible and trying to scrape by. Some people, it's focused on growth and, growing your revenue as high as possible, but still having a fun lifestyle and doing that. So there's different versions and different ways to get the same destination. Usually the principles boil down to the same. It's usually involving real estate, because that's the fastest way to build wealth. So it's going to involve real estate. It's going to involve tax planning and cost segregation and depreciation. And it's going to involve usually either a side hustle and or a side business that generates more revenue than your current job. And so the principles will all boil down to the same, but figure out who's doing what you want to do and who you vibe with, and then connect with them.
Man, that's gold. Like, and I think you nailed it, because for years I struggled with this, where I was like, oh, well, this person's telling me, that, I shouldn't have a nice car, and I should, live on $200 a month. And then this person's over here like, no, you need a, 20, 30, 10X, whatever. And I like bounced back and forth, and I feel bad for my wife, because I think she was along for this ride where like she's getting whiplash. Yeah. And like I've realized something about myself, and it is what it is, but I like nice cars, right? Like, that's something about me that I enjoy nice cars. I feel worse about myself. My self-esteem goes down if I'm driving a jalopy, right? I know investors though that are worth 10 times what I'm worth. And like, they truly don't care. Like one of them that I'm thinking of in particular, he'll drive $1,000 minivan into the ground and he's got like all these problems with the minivan. And I'm like, dude, you're spending more time like messing around with this minivan than doing what you enjoy. Right. And he's like, oh, well, I just don't want a nice car. So for him, that works. Right. For me, like, I'd rather have a car payment and never have to worry about maintenance or repairs. And I get to drive what I want. And then I just figure out how I need to make the revenue on another note. Right. And this, the same thing is, and then I want to get back to your big flip, but totally just to add on what you said. I live on a half acre, right? Love having a huge yard. I hate landscaping. I hate mowing the lawn. I hate weeding. And my neighbor is the complete opposite. He loves it. He's out there every Saturday morning, mowing his lawn, taking 6 hours to just make it perfect. And, I've got the three amigos that come and maintain my lawn for $75 a week or whatever. And like, I don't even know when they come and go. I just know that I don't have to do that. And it buys me 3 hours on a Saturday that I can be with my kids.
Yep.
Right. But that's what's more important to me than mowing the lawn. But then I know some other investors who love to mow the lawn because they'll throw, an Audible in or whatever. And it's just like their like flow focus time, which is fine. But just to put a little bow on this and just thank you for what you said, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, is like everyone, and I do this all the time too, like we match ourselves up with someone that we think we should, like, I be the same as, right? And finances and cars, like all the tangible things, that's just easiest for us. But we don't realize like we've got different temperaments, we've got different ideas, we all grew up differently, and there's no right or wrong in this journey. And I think that's the problem, is even like I'm struggling with this internally, right? Like I hit a goal 2 years ago. Actually, it was a financial goal that I set like 6 years ago. And I said, I'm going to buy a Lamborghini when I hit this, because at that time that was success to me. And I was like, I'm going to reward myself with that. Well, I hit it and I'm like, no, I don't deserve it. Even to this day, I'm still struggling. Like I adjusted my goal a little bit because I was like, okay, well, I'm going to add in enough passive income to make the payment for me. But, if anyone knows me on social media, they'll know when I hit the goal because I'm going to post about it. And it's going to be a very flashy car. So, but I need to hit that goal first. So I readjusted it and I'm still struggling with it. Like, oh, no one needs to spend that on a car. I could put that money in other places but like I said, cars are important to me. Right. And so I can either choose to talk myself out of it again, or I can say, look, this is what's important to me and why. And if someone else doesn't resonate with it, that's okay. Something someone else does will resonate with them. And so anyways.
So yeah, exactly. To put a bow on it, there will be people that look at the Lamborghini and say, oh my gosh, why would you ever need that much money? Why would you spend that? And they will be totally turned off. But you have to always remember the opportunity cost and the other people that look at that and say, hey, I enjoy cars, I would love to do that. And that fires them up. And then they become your mentor and they bring you deals or whatever it is that you're after, or the marketing or bringing on more agents, whatever it is, and helping people through that. And so the quickest way to lose is try to appeal to everybody.
So good. How'd you know it was a Lamborghini?
I think you said it.
Oh, did I? I've got my little, if you're watching on YouTube, I've got my little like goal,
Nice.
So
I love it.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
So dude, tell me about this big flip you guys are doing. Is it North Salt Lake, Bountiful?
Yeah, so it's right on the cusp of North Salt Lake, Bountiful, up by Eaglewood. And so, I mean, we've learned a lot. And so basically the thought process behind this one was back in 2020 and 2021, there was a lot of people, that had HELOCs and they were flipping houses in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. And so everybody had money to buy, a house to do flip or whatever. I say that generally, not everybody, but there was a lot more competition in that $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 space. And so we said, why don't we try a high-end flip, a bigger reward or bigger risk, bigger reward. So we said, hey, let's try this high-end flip. And we found this lot with a really, really good view. It had a 4,000 square foot house on it that was just a complete junker tear down. I mean, we emptied 15 dumpsters of trash out of this house, but there was a really good view on the lot. And so we were able to build a 2,000 square foot addition to make the house 6,000 square feet total. We added a hot tub, we added a gym, we added a home office, a home theater room, a new master suite, a new garage. So we were able to add a lot of value onto this lot because location, you can't duplicate that with the views. And so, I mean, we've had things go fantastic with it, better than we thought. And then we've had some things that we have gotten burned on. And so we've learned a lot from that, but there's only one way to learn, and that's to do it. And so we really were trying to, just basically get out of the high competition, $300,000, $400,000 flips.
Yeah. That's awesome. Interestingly enough, we never talked about it, but I was feeling that same squeeze in that price range because every deal I was looking at, I was like, holy cow, this doesn't make any sense. Like people are buying this thinking that it's going to appreciate and that's where they're going to make their money. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm not going to do that because
we're very picky. I mean, just to kind of give the audience a quick overview of my business is we only flip 2 to 3 homes per year and we wholesale maybe 2 to 3 deals per year. But our average deal size is around $100,000 profit per deal. So we pass on so many deals. So all those deals in 2020 and 21 that people were banking on 10, 15% appreciation in 3 to 6 months, we passed. And I've told this to several people. I wish, of course, hindsight, I wish I would have bought every single deal that came across my desk. But we passed on all the deals and we really try to stick to very, very big margins. Just because we don't want to spend our time, energy, and effort to make a $10,000 return. And I hope that doesn't sound arrogant, but once you really can add value to a property or can analyze a deal well, plus that's just too low, that's too high of risk for me for that little of a spread, $10,000. A lot can go wrong in a flip and burn up $10,000 quickly, as experienced investors know. And so I guess it's not it's not worth my time. It's not worth that risk for $10,000.
yeah. And a lot of people who, they're working an hourly job or whatever, they go, holy cow, $10,000 is a lot of money. And it is, but when you're dealing with a $500,000 asset where you're injecting, call it $100,000 into it, that's only 10% of your rehab budget, which is a normal margin for error, right? So like furnace goes out, that's $6,000. Right. So to your point,
a sewer scope gone bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Sewer line's 15K,
Yeah. I would tell people just for a general idea of flipping. And again, I'm definitely not Mr. Flipper, like I'm still learning, but I would just say that for my rule of thumb, it needs to be about 10% of the after repair value of the home, like profit margin, because as that price goes up, so does the profit need to increase. A, because expenses get a lot bigger on bigger houses, and B, just the amount of risk you're taking on. So just like you said, $10,000 is still a lot of money to me, absolutely. But if you're putting out 200K of your own capital, putting out $200,000 in hopes to get 10K back is a very small reward, I think. So
yeah, so true. Cool. Well, when are you guys going to be done with the Bountiful House?
Yeah, it'll be about 3 or 4 weeks out. So they're finishing up paint this week. Countertops go in on Monday, and then we just hook up the finalized plumbing, throw carpet in. So yeah, we're about 3.5 weeks away.
That's awesome. Well, I'll have to swing by when it's done and walk through. It'll be cool to see it in person. I've kind of watched the progress, like a fly on the wall, but
yeah, and I'm totally transparent. I'll tell people what went well with it, what went terrible with it. And so I'm learning, and I want to share that journey so people can learn along the way as well.
Yeah, no, and that's something I've really come to love about the community we have of investors here in Salt Lake. I'm sure there's people out there that are, hoarding their secrets, but for the most part, everyone that you and I know, everyone's an open book. Yeah. You may have to ask a few questions or take them to dinner or, just get in their proximity to find that out. But I know people who are worth 20, 30 times what I am, and they're still an open book about everything. So,
Yep.
but they're just not going to go out,
Publicize it.
yeah, preaching it on the rooftops. So,
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this up. I want to be sensitive to your time. So knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently on your journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, hindsight's always 2020. I would say, the easy answers would be, never sell anything, long-term wealth. And then, of course, the last 2 years, I would have bought every single deal that came across my desk if I would have known we would have had 30% appreciation in a year. But I don't really kick myself on those. I mean, I would just say learn to get into other types of money sooner, whether that's private money, partnerships, whatever. Because going back to what we talked about, flipping homes is cash intensive, and most types of investing is cash intensive, is to not be afraid to learn of alternative assets and to talk to people. Of course, you want to be prudent and don't tell somebody you know what you're doing if you don't, and put their capital at risk. But I mean, some people, if they want to be the mom and pop and they want to use their own cash and that's how they want to grow their business, it's going to take a very long time. And that's okay if that's what your goal is. But if you want to grow bigger and faster and have bigger profits, you've got to get into alternative money besides just, traditional bank lending. So whether that's, lines of credit, credit cards, anything like that. I've been very successful in the last 24 months. And I'm happy to share this with you, Jordy, talking the difference between business credit and personal credit. So I would say that would be a really good tip for people to look into, is to really start learning business lines of credit as well as personal credit. And that can exponentially grow your business.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Cool. Well, dude, with that being said, thank you for coming on the podcast. If people want to know more about you and what you're up to, how can they find out about you?
Yeah, I'm a grandpa, so I'm just on Facebook. I don't have an Instagram or TikTok or anything like that, or YouTube channel. So yeah, just hit me up on Facebook, and would love to go to lunch with anybody or provide any value I can.
Cool. Are you going to any RIAs that they could meet you at as well?
Yeah, I'm typically at the Salt Lake RIAs and the Utah RIAs, just whenever I can, find a babysitter for the kids.
Awesome. Well, that's good, man. Well, dude, with that being said, thank you, and we'll see you later.
Okay, appreciate it, Jordy. Thanks, man.
Yep. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Financially Free Investor. If you found value in this episode or know someone who would find value in this information, please share with them, subscribe, and send us a review.